Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on whenever you are watching this video. I hope all of you wonderful children are having a fruitful lockdown and are keeping super safe. Today we are going to do our chapter 2 of science, which is living things depend on each other. This is half of your chapter. The other half will be sent to you later, okay? So shall we dive in? Yes, come on, let's go. So today we are going to learn about how do animals depend on plants, what is a food chain, and how do plants depend on animals. Okay? Our first topic is how do animals depend on plants? So, the first and foremost important point, what is something that we need compulsorily to live? You need it, a small ant needs it, a big elephant needs it. Another hint is, what do you breathe in and breathe out? Oxygen. Yes. So animals depend on plants for oxygen. But how? How do plants give us oxygen? Plants give us oxygen when they do photosynthesis. We all know what is photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis is the process of making food by plants, right? Plants do this process to make their food. How do plants make their food? They take in the sunlight, they take in the carbon dioxide, and they take in the water from the soil, and then they make their food. But along with their food, they release one gas into the atmosphere, which is oxygen. Okay, so they release oxygen. This oxygen mixes with the air, and then when you breathe in, this oxygen goes inside your body and helps you live. Okay, so animals depend on plants for oxygen. But the question is, how do these plants release the oxygen into the air? They can do this because every leaf of a plant has very tiny pores on their surface. Okay, pores, P-O-R-E-S, pores on their surface. Pores are nothing but tiny holes. Okay, like you have nose to breathe in and breathe out, like every animal has a nose. Same way, plants have pores on them, but they are so tiny that we cannot see them. So, when you take a leaf and keep it under a microscope, okay, so we are only observing this tiny bit of this leaf, and that tiny bit has a stomata. What is it called? Stomata. The tiny pores are called as stomata. They are all over your leaf. The entire leaf has stomata on it, and there are a lot of stomata on the surface of the leaf. So what this stomata does is, like you can see here in the in this picture, you can see how stomata is opening and closing, right? So this stomata takes in carbon dioxide. See here, it says it takes in carbon dioxide, and after it is done photosynthesis, it releases oxygen into the air. Okay, so that is how oxygen is released into the air with the help of stomata, and animals breathe it in for their survival. Please observe the word stomata and how it is spelled. S-T-O, sto, M-A-T-A, mata. Okay, let us proceed. Next, why animals depend on plants is because animals need shelter. Okay, what is your shelter? What do you call your shelter? So where do you live? In a home, correct. So like home is your shelter, other animals need shelter too. For example, what do birds live in? Birds live in nests, right? And where do they make this nest? On a tall tree, correct? So like that, a lot of animals depend on trees and plants and shrubs and bushes to find shelter in them. Okay, let us look at a few examples. What is this? This is a bird in a desert. We all know in desert we don't have a lot of trees. So then how do the birds make shelters for themselves? They create holes inside a cactus plant. See, this is a cactus plant, right? It has a lot of thorns. So the birds create nice cozy holes inside the cactus plant and stay there. So that is their shelter. Okay. The same way these raccoons and this owl. Raccoons are from rat family. They are bigger than the rats. Okay. So these raccoons and owls, they find hollows of the tree trunk and take shelter in them. A few more examples. You know the first one. What is this? This is a nest. Now let us look at a very interesting animal which also makes a nest for itself. This animal is called as orangutan. Okay, so orangutans, which are very big, they are huge animals. They can get huge, especially the male members of orangutan family. They become very big, and yet they choose big trees and they use the branches of the trees and bend them in a way so that they can form their nests. Can you see here? They have taken the branches of the trees and they have arranged them in such a way that it becomes a nest for them and their baby, and then they rest there. They sometimes even use it as a swing. Okay, so that's orangutans using trees as their shelter. Next is a tree kangaroo. This is another animal which uses a tree as its shelter, and the important bit is that it uses the tree as its shelter and to have its food and stays there for almost its entire life. It hardly comes down. It always stays on a tree. That is a tree kangaroo. So, next is animals depend on plants for food. Yes. So, can you think of how do you depend on plants for food? Do you eat anything that comes from plants? Of course, right? We eat carrots, beans, we eat beetroot, we eat potatoes, we eat onions, we eat garlic, we eat ginger, we eat nuts, we eat fruits, we eat berries. The same way all other animals also get their food from plants. Okay, so there are some animals which eat only plants. They don't eat anything else. They eat only plants like the leaves, the grass, the fruits, the berries. Okay, and then there are some animals which only eat meat. Correct? And then there are some animals which eat both plant and meat. So we are going to learn about what are these animals called. The first kind of animal is a herbivore. What are herbivores? Animals which eat only plants. Okay? Only plants. They don't eat anything else. They eat only plants. These animals are called as herbivores. They don't eat meat. They don't eat other animals. They eat only plants. Okay? So these are herbivorous animals, or they are called herbivores. Can you think of a herbivorous animal? Can you? Cow, goat. Correct? Yes. So let's look at some examples. So there's a bird having nectar from a flower. There are some birds which only depend on plants. They don't eat anything else, like the nectar from the flower, the berries on the trees, the fruits like guava, mangoes. These birds only survive or eat food that comes from plant. Okay, so these birds are herbivorous birds. Okay, which animal is this? Koala. Koala bear is a herbivorous animal. It stays on a tree and it eats the leaves of that tree. We all know this is a cow. Another example, which animal is this? Deer, correct. We all know who this is. That's a chimpanzee. Yes, chimpanzees, even though they are huge and they are big, but they are herbivorous animals. That's a bunny rabbit. Yes. And this is a elephant. Now, there are few animals which eat only meat. How do they get their meat? By hunting other animals, right? So these animals only eat other animals, the meat from other animals. So these kind of animals are called as carnivores. They eat only other animals, okay? They eat only other animals. They don't eat directly from the plants. They eat only other animals. But if you see, they are also indirectly dependent on plants. But how? Okay, for example, a lion is hunting a deer. Okay, for this deer, what is the food? The plant is the food, correct? Deer eats food from plants like grass, let us say grass. So when deer eats grass, it finds energy and it lives, correct? And then this deer is hunted by the lion. So the lion is also indirectly dependent on the plant, correct? Because lion depends on food which eats plant as its food. So that's why they depend, the carnivorous animals depend indirectly on plants for food by eating animals that are herbivores. Deer is a herbivore, right? So carnivores also indirectly depend on plants. What are some examples? We all know who this is. Lion. Okay, so there are some birds which are called as birds of prey. Okay, they are called as birds of prey because these birds know how to hunt. Okay, and they are few of the strongest hunters in the wild. So these birds like this osprey bird or this owl or other birds like eagles, they know how to hunt in the wild and they hunt for their food and they eat only other small animals like fish, rat. An eagle can even hunt something as big as a goat or a deer. That's how strong they are. Okay, and then we have other examples like snakes which eat other small animals like rats or some fish depending on where the snake lives. The next kind of animals are called omnivores. So we read about herbivores which eat only plants. Then we read about carnivores which eat only other animals. And then we have omnivores because they eat both plants and other animals. So animals which eat both plants and animals are called omnivores. Now what are the few examples of omnivorous animals? Bear. Yes, you can see here a bear is hunting for a fish. And a bear can also eat food from plants like tender grass shoots or some berries from some shrubs. or some fruit from a tree. So bears eat both meat and food from plant. We can see here some birds, they eat insects and they eat berries and other fruits. So some birds are omnivores. Then we have a turtle here. This turtle is trying to hunt for jellyfish. This is a jellyfish. It is inside a ocean or a sea and it is trying to hunt for jellyfish. And here it is trying to eat the seaweeds which grow underwater on the surface of the ocean. So a turtle is also an omnivore. So our second topic is food chain. As the topic suggests, food and chain. We are going to study about how food travels from one living thing to another, okay, in a sequence. Before we read about the definition of food chain, let us see how a food chain works, okay. This is a sun. Now, the sunlight from sun is taken by the plant. Why does a plant need sunlight from the sun? We all know. We also read about it in the first slide. Because it needs to make its own food. So we all know plants are the only living things which can make their own food. They do not depend on any other living thing to make their own food. So plants take the sunlight from the sun and make their own food. Now this grass or this plant is eaten by a herbivore, right? What are animals which eat only plants called herbivores? So this plant becomes food for a herbivore. For example, a deer here, okay? Now this deer becomes food for a carnivore because animals which eat other animals are called carnivores. So this carnivore will eat this herbivore, which is a lion. Let us say in this example it's a lion which will eat the deer. So have you seen how the chain proceeds? Why is it called a chain? Because all living things are linked to each other for their food requirement. Okay. So what is a food chain? Now it should be very easy. It is a sequence. We saw, right? First there was sun, then there was a plant, then there was a herbivore, then there was a carnivore. Correct? So it is a sequence. Sequence of what? Sequence of living things. Plant, a herbivorous animal, a carnivorous animals, all are living things, right? So it is a sequence of living things found in a region. Region is nothing but a place, in a place, okay? In which each living thing is food to the next member. So each living thing, for example, plant, is food to the next member. What is the next member? A herbivorous animal. So plant becomes food for a herbivorous animal. Herbivorous animal becomes food for a carnivorous animal, right? So once again, let us read the entire definition. A food chain is a sequence of living things found in a region in which each living thing is food to the next member in the sequence, right? Now, who are the members of the food chain? Who are the members of a food chain? We saw that there were plants and then there were herbivorous animals and then there were carnivorous animals. Okay, so these are animals and then we have plants. So plants are called the producers. Okay, why are they called producers? Because plants do not need any other living thing to depend on. Plants are self-sufficient. They can make their own food by themselves through a process called photosynthesis. Can you do photosynthesis? No, right? Can a cat do photosynthesis? No, right? So they don't know how to make their own food. correct? So plants know how to make their own food. So they are called as producers because they can produce their own food. So they are called as producers. Now animals depend on plants or other animals to have their food or to consume their food. So they are called as consumers. So what are plants called? Plants are called as producers and animals are called as consumers. Okay? Because animals do not produce their own food, they can only consume food. Okay, so they are called as consumers. So who are the two members of the food chain? One are producers, which are plants, and the second member are consumers, which are the animals. Correct? Now, for the entire food chain to function, what was the first thing we saw? What was the first thing? This one. What was the first thing we saw in the diagram? It was a sun. Correct. So sun has to give its energy to plant in the first place to make its food. Correct. So when plant makes its food, then only the other animals can eat it, and then the carnivores can eat these animals. है ना? But plants need compulsorily the first source of energy is sun. So hence, what is the primary source of energy? What is the primary source of energy in a food chain? It's a sun. Okay. So here is another example of a food chain. This time let us look at the food chain in terms of primary source of energy, producers and consumers. Okay. So we learned that the primary source of energy which comes first in a food chain is sun. Okay, the sun. The energy from the sun is taken by a producer or a plant, right? The energy from the sun is taken by a producer or a plant, and then from here the chain of consumers will start. So this plant is eaten by a caterpillar. This caterpillar is eaten by a frog. This frog is eaten by a snake. And this snake is eaten by an owl. So if you see, all these are consumers. So in a food chain, you can have any number of consumers, right? Because any herbivore can get eaten by any carnivore or an omnivore, right? And then this animal again can be eaten by the next animal. So we can have any number of consumers in a food chain, but it starts with the primary source of energy, which is a sun, which is taken by a producer, which is a plant, to make its food. Correct? So there can be various kinds of food chains depending on where the living things live. Okay, and what is available for them to survive in their surroundings, right? So if you take a fish, can you imagine how a fish food chain would be? Let us say it is living in a lake. So the kind of plants that are available in a lake are different than what is available in a forest, right? So kind of small animals which are in a lake is different than what small animals is in a forest. So as the surroundings of an animal changes, the kind of food chain also changes. So an animal looks around itself and finds what is suitable for it to eat, and that forms the food chain for the animal. Okay. Now let us take a look at few examples of different food chain. Let us take a look at a small food chain. So we all know that there's always a sun, right? This sun gives energy to a plant. The plant is eaten by a herbivore, and herbivore is eaten by a carnivore. Correct? Now, plant is called as a producer, and after that all animals are called as consumers, correct? And sun is the primary source of energy. Next, energy is taken by plants, which makes carrots. These carrots are eaten by rabbit. So what is this? This is a producer. Rabbit is a consumer. And always notice, because plants have to be first eaten by a herbivorous animal. Okay, because a carnivore, you cannot keep a fox here because fox cannot eat the carrots, right? So a herbivorous animal. The first consumer is always a herbivorous animal which eats the plant. So the rabbit gets eaten by the fox. The fox is eaten by the lion, right? So it forms a food chain. Now let us see this kind of food chain. Grass, which takes energy from sun, and this grass is eaten by the grasshopper, which is the first consumer. This grasshopper is eaten by the frog, which is the second consumer. The frog is eaten by the python, the snake, which is the third consumer, and this python gets hunted by a bird of prey, which is the eagle, which is the fourth and ultimate consumer, right? So grass is the producer here, and all these animals are consumers. Notice our first animal is a herbivore. Sometimes it can be an omnivore also, because omnivorous animals eat both plants and animals. Okay. So we already read that food chains depend on surroundings of an animal. Now what is that surrounding of an animal called? It is nothing but a habitat of the animal. Okay. Hence we are saying a food chain always belongs to a habitat. A habitat provides a living thing with everything it needs to survive. So when you look around, let us say uh, our home is our habitat. Okay, so if you look around yourself, do you have everything that you need to survive? Do you have food? Do you have caring parents? Do you have all the essential comforts that you need? Yes, right? So that is your habitat. Like that, every animal has its own habitat, and depending on that habitat, it will create its food chain. Okay, so can you think of a food chain that might exist in and around your house? Can you? Let us take a small example. Okay, a very small example, which is you have plants which give carrots. You buy the carrots, right? And to cook them, you peel the carrots. You throw the peel into the dustbin. This peel, which comes from a plant, is, let us say, eaten by a cockroach. Okay, at night a cockroach sneaks out into the kitchen and looks into your dustbin to eat any plant product. This cockroach in return gets eaten by a lizard. That is a food chain in your house, right? So if you look around, you can find a lot of food chains. Do you have pigeons around your house? Can you think of a food chain that a pigeon might be involved in? Right? So whenever you look at an animal, you can actually think of a food chain regarding how it gets its food. So here's a fun activity for you. Okay. All of you think of a desert food chain. Think of a plant that is in a desert, and which animal might be eating this plant, and which carnivorous animal might be eating this herbivorous animal. Okay, you can draw this and have a little fun, color it well, and use your imagination. Okay, let us look at a marine food chain. Marine food chain is nothing but a food chain which might exist in water bodies like river or sea or ocean or lakes or ponds. Okay, so underwater, what kind of plant grows underwater? It's called a seaweed. Weeds grow underwater, right? So these weeds are eaten by small fish. Small fish is eaten by a little bigger fish, and this big fish ultimately gets hunted by a shark. So that is a food chain. This is a producer, seaweed. Small fish is a herbivore, or it can be omnivore, and it is the first consumer. Then the bigger fish is the second consumer, and the shark is a third consumer, right? Now, an important question. Let us imagine there's a food chain. There's a sun, there's a plant, there is a deer, and there is a lion. Okay, that is a food chain. Now, what will happen if one of the members of the food chain is harmed? Can you think of it? Okay, let us think what will happen if there are no deers. So there's the sun, there's the plant, and then there are the lions. In between there are no deers. So you have the sun, then you have the plants, we don't have the deers, and then there's the lion. Can the lion directly eat the plant and live? Can it? Can lions eat plants and live? No, the lion will also die ultimately. Okay? And there is nobody to eat this plant because deers are not there. There is no one to eat this plant. So the plant will just keep growing everywhere. And suddenly we'll have so much of weeds around us that it will become uncontrollable. So all the members of the food chain are very, very important to maintain balance in the nature. Correct? Now, can you think of reasons how are these members harmed? Let us say if there are no deers, can you think of reasons why there might be no deers? Like how will deers just die? There can be various reasons, right? For example, illegal hunting or poaching. If human beings keep killing these animals, then the population of deers will become very, very less, which will in return affect the plants and the lions or other carnivorous animals. What are the other reasons? Other reasons can be something like climate change. Due to so much heat, have you noticed how hot it is these days in cities? But we have ACs, we have fans, we have coolers. But do animals have ACs, fans and coolers? No, right? They cannot bear this heat and hence they might die due to lack of water or due to excessive heat from the sun. So if they start dying slowly, it will affect the food chain. So there can be various reasons why some members of the food chain might get affected. So we just saw how if one member gets affected, all other members of the food chain will get affected, which results in disturbing the balance in nature. Okay, now let us see. Let us do first situation and you will do the second situation on your own. Okay. The first situation is there are right number of carnivores, the deer population is in control and there is enough grass. That is, everything is fine here. There is enough grass, so the deers, all these deers will have some food to eat. And then all these deers, when they are healthy and they are well fed, will be hunted by a carnivorous animal to make its food. So everyone is healthy and happy in this food chain. But what is the situation 2? Situation 2 says there are no carnivores. See, this one is not here, right? So when there are no carnivores, what can happen? We just spoke about it, but you have to pause this video and think on your own and answer these questions. Okay? Now, till now we studied how animals depend on plants. But do plants depend on animals? Let us see. So, plants depend on animals for carbon dioxide, right? Have you heard about carbon dioxide? Okay. So, when you breathe in, you take in oxygen, right? You took in oxygen. And when you breathe out, what do you breathe out? Carbon dioxide. Correct. So you take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. All animals do this. Now this carbon dioxide is taken by the plants, right? By the grass, by the tree, by the shrubs, by the bushes. All plants take in this carbon dioxide, which is given by the animals, right? They take in this carbon dioxide and make their food. So how do they depend on animals? Because they need carbon dioxide to make their food and stay alive. So plants depend on animals for carbon dioxide. Next, plant depends on animal to produce seeds. To produce seeds. Where have you generally seen seeds? Have you seen them while you're eating fruits? Right? So when you're eating an apple or an orange or a watermelon, or even in some vegetables like chilies, right? When you split open a chili, there are a lot of seeds in them. Or bottle gourd or bitter gourd. All the gourds have a lot of seeds in them. The pumpkin, right? A tomato. Tomato also has seeds inside it if you cut it open, right? So now if you notice from all the examples, the seeds are found in the fruits and vegetables which are produced by plants. Now how do plants make these fruit and vegetables? These plants have flowers. These flowers reproduce fruits and vegetables. If a plant does not have flowers, then it cannot produce fruits and vegetables. Okay. So we have understood what do seeds do. Now, if you take these seeds and put them back into the soil, they will create more plants, right? So that's how plants can grow in number with the help of their seeds. Now, how do animals help in producing seeds? Okay, so there is a process called pollination. There are some animals like bees, butterflies, bats, birds, ants, which helps the flowers in pollination. That is, for example, let us look at this bat. What is this bat doing? If you see, it has inserted its head inside the flower to drink the nectar of the flower, the sweet nectar which the bat likes. The nectar is somewhere here. It has a long tongue. It dives into the flower and it rolls out its long tongue till the base of the flower to take the nectar. Now during this process, what is happening is there are something called as pollen grains on this flower. This is a male flower. All male flowers have pollen grains. They are tiny tiny grains like sand. Okay. So these grains, because the head of the bat is inside the flower, these grains will attach to the head of the bat. Right? So when the bat is trying to take its head out, the pollen grains get attached to the fur of on the head of the bat. Now when the bat flies away and sits on another flower, right, which is a female flower, let us say it is a female flower. So when the bat is trying to take the nectar from the female flower, these pollen from the head of the bat fall on this flower, and that helps this flower to produce fruits and vegetables which have seeds in them, and then these seeds can make more plants. So this process is called as pollination, and these animals are called as pollinators. Okay, so these animals are called as pollinators. The process is called as pollination. Right? So did you understand how plants depend on animals to produce seeds? Interesting, right? The third thing for which plants depend on animals is to disperse seeds. Now we saw plants depend for producing seeds, but this is disperse the seeds. Disperse means to leave them in other places. For example, let us say it can also mean distributing, right? So they depend on animals to take their seeds and put them somewhere else. For example, let us look at the squirrel. This squirrel will collect all the nuts from various trees and take it to its shelter and it will eat, right? So the tree was somewhere else. It will pick up the nut from that tree and bring it somewhere else where its shelter is. So now what has happened? The nut has traveled from that tree to somewhere else with the help of this squirrel. Now after it eats the nut, it will drop the seed where it has eaten the nut. So now the seed is dispersed, right? Even a bird can do that. A bird can go to a berry tree, pluck the berry and take it to its babies to eat in a nest which it has built somewhere else. And once the babies eat the food, they will drop the seed there. So now what has happened? The seed from one tree has gone and fallen somewhere else. So plants produce fruits which contain seeds. These fruits are eaten by animals like birds and squirrels, which help in dispersing the seeds. We just saw how, right? So we have come to the end of today's slide, but let us just quickly revise and see what have we studied today. Okay, the first thing we studied is how animals depend on plants. So what are the three things that animals depend on plants for? Number one is oxygen, number two is shelter, and number three is food. Okay, next we studied about what is a food chain, right? Do you remember? So we studied that food chain is a sequence of living things found in a region in which each living thing is food for the next member, right? Do you remember how the plant was eaten by a herbivore and herbivore was eaten by a carnivore, right? So what are the members called? The plants are called producers and the animals are called consumers. And who is the primary source of energy? The mighty sun. Yes. The next thing we studied was how plants depend on animals for various things, right? The first thing they depend on it is for carbon dioxide. The plants take the carbon dioxide from the air which is released by animals, and what do they do with this carbon dioxide? Photosynthesis. They make their food. Next we studied pollination, where we saw how animals helped plants to produce seeds through a process called pollination. Then we saw dispersal of seeds. We saw how animals help in dispersing seeds away from the plant. So let us end here, children. I hope we all meet very soon. I know you must be missing school. Are you? I hope you are. I'm very excited to meet you guys again. Also, during this lockdown, make sure you are safe and healthy, because we all know health is wealth. There is nothing more important than health. So take care of your health as much as you can. Okay? Also make sure you learn new something every day, because like it is very commonly said, सीखना बंद तो जीतना बंद. So if you stop learning, you will stop winning. So learn something new every single day of this lockdown. It is a golden opportunity. You have so much time. use your resources well. Also, most importantly, help your parents in your house chores. Okay, so I hope all of you are being good and listening to your parents and helping them. So this is the end. Goodbye. Happy learning.